pretend we are married for a month.
The single-dad CEO asked his nanny to save his company image. The city outside the tall windows pulsed with light, but inside the Callaway Tower, everything felt frozen. Just 24 hours earlier, the annual Callaway Group Gala had unfolded in glittering elegance. Crystal chandeliers, champagne flutes, polished speeches. And yet, all it took was a single photo, taken at the wrong angle, in the wrong moment, to unravel everything Isaac Callaway had worked so hard to rebuild. He remembered the woman laughing, placing a friendly hand on his chest, and the flash that followed a second too fast. The headline the next morning read, "Widowed CEO gets cozy at company gala, is Isaac Callaway moving on?" The article was vague, speculative, but the photo did enough damage on its own. In a world where reputation meant millions, appearances were everything. By noon, the board had summoned an emergency meeting. The room was silent, tense. 12 executives, one long, polished table. Isaac sat at the head, jaw tight, fingers steepled in front of him. "It's been 2 years since your wife passed," began a board member, carefully. "We've given you space to grieve, Isaac, but with the merger ahead, stability is critical." Another added, "This photo, even if it's harmless, it doesn't look that way. Investors are rattled. We're being questioned. So we're asking you, directly, what's going on?" Isaac kept his gaze steady. He could feel the weight of 100 assumptions pressing against him. He cleared his throat. "I understand the concern," he said slowly, "but there's no scandal here. I'm married. I have been for a month." A stunned silence followed. Someone coughed. Another leaned back in their chair, brows raised. "You're married?" one man repeated. "I kept it private for personal reasons," Isaac replied. "My family life isn't part of my business strategy." It was bold, sudden, but for the moment, it worked. The board murmured among themselves, glancing at one another. No one had been invited to a wedding, no photos, no formal announcement. But Isaac was known for his discretion. If he said he was married, most would accept it. They didn't need proof. Not yet. What they didn't know was that there was no wife. There was only Denise Carter, the young woman with kind eyes and long blonde hair, who tucked his daughter into bed each night, who soothed nightmares and packed peanut butter sandwiches cut into little hearts. She had been Isla's nanny for almost a year, and the only person Isaac trusted enough to ask what he was about to ask. That night, the storm rolled in hard. Wind lashed against the windows of the penthouse, and rain streaked the glass in steady lines. Isaac stood outside the guest wing, one hand raised to knock. For a long moment he hesitated. Then, 2 quiet knocks. The door opened. Denise stood barefoot on the soft rug, dressed in a pale blue sweater and flannel pajama pants. Her blonde hair fell in gentle waves around her shoulders, damp from a recent shower. Her gray-blue eyes searched his face. "Isla's okay?" she asked quickly. Isaac nodded. "She's asleep." Denise stepped aside slightly, but didn't move to invite him in. Then, "Is something wrong?" He exhaled. "I need to ask you something, and it's going to sound crazy." Denise waited, curious and cautious. "There was a photo," he began, "from last night, at the gala. It's being spun into something it's not, and now the board is doubting me. Again." Her expression shifted. Concern crept in. "I told them I was married," he said simply. Silence stretched. "You what?" "I told them I've been married for a month. They believed me. And I need to keep it that way, just long enough to stabilize everything. I just need one person I can trust." The realization hit her slowly. "You want me to pretend to be your wife?" He nodded once. "Just for a month. We'll keep it quiet. It doesn't have to change anything. You can say no." Denise looked past him, down the hall, toward Isla's room, toward the little girl who had finally begun to smile again. When she turned back, her face was pale. She was stunned, and her heart was at war. Denise Carter had once stood at the front of a classroom filled with laughter. Crayons, finger paint, snack time songs, Those were her world at 23. Her heart belonged to children, not because they were simple, but because they were honest. And for a brief, precious time, she had one of her own. A baby boy with deep brown eyes and tiny fingers that wrapped tightly around hers, like he was anchoring her to the earth. He had been her light, her everything. Until he got a fever. Until the nurse said, "He just needs rest." Until the doctor came too late. It was a mistake, a tragic oversight in a crowded hospital. But no apology could bring him back. The day after the funeral, she waited. For his father. For the man who once said he loved her. But he never came. Not to the service. Not to say goodbye. Not even to call. He disappeared. Just like that, Denise was left with an empty crib, unopened baby books, and a heart that no longer knew what whole felt like. She quit teaching. The school sent flowers and a card, but standing in front of a classroom became unbearable. The silence between songs reminded her of a nursery that no longer needed lullabies. She became a nanny instead. It was the only thing that felt bearable, the only way to stay near what she had lost, the laughter of children, the hope in their eyes, the gentle joy of sticky hands in hers. When she met Isla Calloway, something shifted. The little girl was 5, fragile, quiet. Her soft brown curls framed wide eyes that barely looked up. She wore pink dresses every day, as if dressing herself in sweetness could keep the world at bay. Denise was told Isla didn't speak to strangers. No one expected she would speak to her. On the third day, Denise found Isla curled behind the living room curtains, knees pulled tight, silent tears on her cheeks. She didn't speak, just sat beside her and opened a storybook. By the time the last page turned, Isla reached for her hand. The next morning she whispered, "More story, please." From then on, something unspoken passed between them. Trust, safety, maybe even love. Isaac noticed the change but didn't ask. He kept his distance, polite, composed, always focused. A man of structure, with eyes that looked like they'd seen too much. In quiet moments, Denise saw the way he looked at Isla, like she might break, like he was afraid to love what he couldn't protect. His wife Lillian had died in a car accident. 3 years ago, on a rainy afternoon, she and Isaac had argued over the phone. Something small, he said, domestic, forgettable. But she left angry and never made it home. All that remained was her broken wristwatch, found at the crash site. Isaac kept it still, tucked inside his jacket pocket, like holding it might somehow stop time. That night, after Isaac asked Denise to pretend to be his wife, she couldn't sleep. She sat by the window, watching the city drown in rain. Her fingers traced the rim of a cold teacup as if trying to find an answer in its emptiness. When morning came and the sky faded into soft blue, she walked into his study. He looked up, hopeful but silent. "I'll do it," she said, "but only on one condition." He set down his pen. "Anything." She met his gaze, steady and calm. Isla can never know it's pretend, not for 1 second. Isaac's expression shifted, something tender rising behind the weariness in his eyes. "I promise," he said. And so, for the first time, they both stepped into a lie. Not to deceive, but to protect the one person they could both still believe in. Isla. The first morning Denise moved into the Calloway residence. The air felt different. It was not the luxury of the penthouse. She had walked these halls before. It was the weight of her role, now formalized. No longer just Isla's nanny. She was now, at least to the outside world, Mrs. Calloway. A tray of breakfast was sent up to her room that morning. Tea, toast, berries arranged with meticulous care. A handwritten note sat beneath the teacup. Just one sentence. "Thank you, Isaac." She folded the note and slipped it into her drawer without a word. By the end of the week, the story had been released to select media outlets. Private ceremony for tech CEO. Isaac Calloway quietly remarries. No photos, no location. Just enough to shift the narrative away from the scandal. Internally, within the company, Isaac's assistant handled the quiet briefings. Denise would accompany him to a charity dinner next month. There would be photos, small talk, hand-holding, appearances. And appearances, as it turned out, began at home. That first Sunday, Margaret Calloway arrived. She was regal in a navy coat, silver hair pinned back, pearl earrings fastened with precision. Her handshake was firm, her eyes assessing. "So," she said to Denise as they sat in the sunroom, Isla playing quietly with blocks nearby, "You're the woman who managed to pull Isaac out of mourning." Denise smiled gently, folding her hands in her lap. "I'm just trying to take care of the family." Margaret's gaze lingered a moment too long before she nodded once. "We'll see." That evening, they all sat down for dinner. Real silverware, real wine glasses, a table set like a stage. Isaac sat at the head, Isla beside him, Denise across the table. A portrait of domestic bliss, a performance for one guest. But halfway through the meal, something happened. Isla looked up, her fork paused above her peas, and said softly, "Daddy, I want to give you something." Isaac blinked. "You do?" She nodded, slid off her chair, and returned with a folded card she had made with Denise earlier that afternoon. Crayon drawings filled the front, stars, hearts, and 3 stick figures. Inside, in clumsy, careful letters, it read, "Happy birthday, Daddy. I love you." Isaac froze. He had never heard those words from her before. His voice caught as he read it again. "Thank you, baby," he managed, pulling her into a hug. He glanced up at Denise over Isla's shoulder, something soft and shaken in his eyes. Later that night, well after Margaret had gone, Denise padded down the hall in her slippers to check on Isla. A soft whimper drew her in. Isla was tossing in bed, cheeks damp, murmuring through a dream. Denise sat beside her, stroking her hair, then gently gathered the small girl in her arms, rocked her, whispered comfort, hummed a lullaby she had not sung since her own son was alive. Isaac had come to check as well, the door half open behind him. He did not speak. He simply stood there, watching from the shadows, watching the woman holding his daughter like she was her own. The way Isla's breath slowed, her fists relaxed, her tiny body melting into Denise's warmth. It was something he had not seen in 3 years, something he had thought was gone forever. When Denise finally looked up, she found Isaac there in the doorway. They said nothing, but in the silence between them, something shifted. The lines between acting and feeling had begun to blur. And though neither dared admit it yet, this performance was beginning to feel dangerously real. The transformation was not loud. It did not arrive in declarations or grand gestures. It came quietly, like chamomile steeping in still water, like the softness of rain on window panes. Denise began to notice the small ways life inside the Calloway home was shifting, not because anyone tried to change it, but because the pretending had quietly given way to something else, something real. Each night after dinner, when the lights dimmed and Isla started to yawn, Denise would make chamomile tea, just like Lillian used to. One evening, as she stirred honey into the cup, Isaac stepped into the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, his expression unreadable. "She always did that," he said. Denise looked up. "The tea?" He nodded. "Lillian. Every night, even when Isla was tiny. She believed rituals gave children something to hold on to." Denise held out the honey spoon. "Would you like to try tonight?" He hesitated. "For Isla," she added softly. So he did. His hands were steady, but there was a quiet hesitation, something vulnerable in the way he held the cup. Denise watched as he sat beside Isla, helping her take slow sips, brushing a curl from her forehead. That night, for the first time, Isla fell asleep in his arms. A week later, a steady storm moved through the city, the kind that blurred streetlights into soft halos. The 3 of them stayed inside. Denise had been organizing old photo albums in the study when Isaac wandered in, shirt slightly untucked, holding 2 mugs of hot cocoa. She smiled at the sight. "Peace offering?" He gave a half shrug. "Call it nostalgia." They sat on the rug near the fireplace, albums spread out between them, Lillian's laughter frozen in glossy prints, baby Isla covered in cake, holidays, vacations, a life Denise had never known, but was now helping hold together. When they reached a photo of Lillian and Isla at the beach, Isaac paused. His fingers trembled. "She was laughing when I took this," he said. The umbrella kept blowing away, but she called it the perfect day. Denise placed her hand gently over his. "She looks like someone who loved deeply." Isaac nodded. His eyes shone, but he didn't cry. Denise leaned forward and wiped a tear that hadn't yet fallen. A gesture so small, yet so personal, it nearly undid him. The next morning, something changed. Denise walked into the living room and froze. Above the mantel, where a black and white photo of Isaac and Lillian had always stood alone, there was now a new frame. A photo of the three of them, Isaac, Denise, and Isla, taken just days before at the botanical garden. Isla had begged for it. Denise remembered laughing, her hand lightly touching Isaac's arm, Isla grinning in her pink dress. No one had told him to print it. No one had asked him to put it there. He didn't say a word about it. And somehow, that made it mean more. That Thursday, Isaac invited Denise to a formal company gala, her first public appearance as Mrs. Calloway. She wore a deep navy gown, elegant, understated, her blonde hair curled gently around her shoulders. When she stepped out of the car at his side, curious eyes turned to them, whispers trailing behind. During dinner, Isaac conversed with board members about an upcoming launch. One of the directors turned to Denise with a smile. "And what does the new Mrs. Calloway think of all this excitement?" Before she could answer, Isaac reached for her hand. Not a planned gesture, not rehearsed, just instinct. He laced his fingers with hers and said, "She's been my greatest support." The warmth of his hand sent a quiet rush through her chest. She looked at him, startled. He didn't look back, just continued the conversation, calm and certain. But she felt it. That touch wasn't part of the act anymore. Something had changed. And this time, it was real. At first, Denise thought it was her imagination, a flicker of movement in the corner of her eye. The same car parked outside Isla's preschool 3 days in a row. A man pretending to read a newspaper across from the park, the faint glint of a camera lens peeking through the folds. But it wasn't her imagination. Confirmation came on a quiet Thursday afternoon, the kind she and Isla had come to cherish. The little girl wore her favorite pink dress, sticky with grape jelly from their picnic, as she curled into Denise's lap beneath the old maple tree at the park. Denise whispered softly into Isla's curls, half lullaby, half daydream, when she heard the unmistakable click of a shutter. Her eyes snapped toward the sound. Too late. The man was already walking away, camera slung low, melting into the crowd. 2 days later, the headline hit the tabloids. Calloway's new wife, or just the help, nanny turned stepmom in scandalous photo. Beneath it, a blurred image, Denise holding Isla, cropped tightly to suggest intimacy. The subtext was sharper than the photo. Sources claim the grieving CEO hired the woman caring for his daughter to pose as his wife. Is it love, or just damage control? The fallout was swift. Investors murmured, board members panicked, social media speculated with venom, and worst of all, Isaac was dragged through the mud, again, for allegedly using his grief for sympathy and spin. Denise couldn't let that happen. Not when she knew how much he had endured. Not when she had begun to care far more than she should. So she started investigating. She traced the photo's watermark, cross-checked media registries. A friend from her teaching days helped her dig deeper. The trail led to one name, Julian Miles, senior investment director, and a man long rumored to resent Isaac's leadership. One evening, Denise followed him. Heart pounding, she tailed his car as he left Calloway Tower, keeping 2 vehicles behind. He drove across town to a nondescript underground garage. Under flickering lights, Julian met with 2 unfamiliar men. One carried a folder. The other showed images on a tablet. Proof. This was it. Sabotage. Denise stepped forward, phone low, camera recording. Then, A heel scuffed against the concrete. A metal pipe clinked. One of the men turned. "Hey, who's there?" Denise froze. A broad-shouldered man in a leather jacket started toward her. "You lost, sweetheart?" She stepped back, voice caught. Then, headlights. A sleek black car skidded to a halt, engine low and threatening. The door flew open. Isaac. Rain clung to his dark coat as he stepped out, gaze hard, every inch the man in control. "She's with me," he said, voice razor sharp. "Touch her again, and I will make sure your name disappears from every contract in this city." The man hesitated, then backed off. Julian froze, caught mid-step. Isaac," he stuttered. This isn't what it looks like." Isaac cut him off. "I know exactly what it is, and you're finished." He turned without waiting for a reply and led Denise silently to the car. They drove in silence for several blocks, city lights smearing the windows. Finally, Isaac pulled over near the river, under dim street lamps. He turned off the engine, his hands resting on the wheel. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked. Denise looked down. "I didn't want to worry you. I thought maybe I could fix it before it became worse." Isaac leaned back, rubbing a hand over his face. His voice, when it came, was quieter. "Denise, if something had happened to you tonight." He paused, jaw tight. Then, "Isla would have lost another mother." She looked at him, stunned. "What did you say?" "She already sees you that way," he said, looking directly at her. "And if I'm honest, so do I." Her breath caught. Tears welled. Isaac reached into the back seat, pulled off his jacket, and draped it over her shoulders. The night wasn't cold. It wasn't about warmth. It was about care. About presence. He didn't say another word. He simply stayed there, beside her, silent, steady. And in that silence, Denise realized this wasn't pretend anymore, not for him, and not for her. The illusion had lasted longer than either of them had dared imagine. It had survived public eyes, boardroom whispers, and even the sharp scrutiny of the press, but it could not survive Margaret Calloway. Isaac's mother had always been a woman of quiet strength and sharper instincts. She played her role perfectly, polite smiles, gentle questions, the occasional compliment on Denise's cooking. But she had been watching. Margaret missed nothing. It happened on a gray Wednesday morning. Denise had just dropped Isla off at preschool when she stepped into the living room and saw Margaret waiting, spine straight, a folded paper clenched in her hand. "I called the courthouse," Margaret said evenly. "There's no marriage certificate for you and my son." Denise froze. Margaret stood, closing the space between them. "I also checked with my attorney. No private ceremony, no sealed record, nothing." The silence was heavy. "Would you like to explain?" Margaret asked. Denise's hands shook. I can't." Margaret's voice never rose, but disappointment filled every word. "I knew Isaac was hurting, but I didn't think he'd fabricate a marriage to save his position, and I didn't think he'd involve his daughter, or you." "It wasn't like that," Denise whispered. "We didn't plan. You let that little girl believe you're her mother." Margaret's voice cracked. "She already lost hers. Now you'll leave too?" Denise said nothing. Margaret shook her head. "Whatever this is, it ends today." Denise packed in silence. She folded the pink sweater Isla loved to sleep in, the scarf she wore on cold walks, her toothbrush, the crayon drawing taped to her mirror, 3 stick figures holding hands. She placed each item carefully in her bag, as though folding away moments she was not ready to lose. Her decision had been made, not for herself, not even for Margaret, but for Isaac, whose name had already endured enough scrutiny. What started as protection had now become a liability. She zipped the bag, blinking back tears, when a small voice stopped her. "Where are you going?" Denise turned. Isla stood in the doorway, trembling in her pink pajamas, clutching her stuffed bunny. "I have to go, sweetheart," Denise said gently. "Why?" Denise knelt. "Sometimes grown-ups have to fix things. I need to give your daddy space." Isla's lip trembled. But, your mommy. The word landed like thunder. Denise blinked. What did you say? I don't want you to go, Mommy. Isla sobbed, running into Denise's arms. Denise held her close, tears flowing freely. I love you, Isla. So much. Behind them, a voice cracked. Isla. Isaac stood at the doorway. He had heard it. He had heard his daughter call Denise, Mommy. His chest heaved, his knees faltered, and for the first time in 3 years, he cried. He crossed the room slowly, kneeling beside the only 2 people who had ever truly broken through his walls. She's not going anywhere, he said. Denise looked away, shaking her head. Your mother knows. She's going to expose everything. If I stay, it'll ruin your reputation. No, he replied, voice steady. If you leave, Isla loses you. And I lose the only person who's made this house feel alive again. She met his gaze, searching. Is this still a performance? She whispered. Because if it is, I can't be part of it anymore. Isaac reached for her hand. I don't know when it stopped being pretend, he said softly. I only know that it has. She stared at him, vulnerable and unsure, hoping for something more, something final. But no more words came. So she stood, heartbreaking, bag in hand, and walked past him. Isaac didn't follow. Not yet. The tears on his face weren't the tears of a man losing a nanny. They were the tears of a man realizing he had fallen in love, too late to stop it, too afraid to speak it, and just seconds away from losing it all. The boardroom at Callaway Group had never been this full. Executives, shareholders, legal advisors, PR specialists, everyone who mattered was there, faces tight with tension. A hush blanketed the room as Isaac stood at the front, hands clasped, posture straight, but his eyes shadowed with fatigue. On the projection screen behind him, a slideshow had just ended, an internal audit, a market strategy. But no one was paying attention to numbers anymore. They were all waiting for one thing: the truth. The whispers had grown too loud to ignore. Rumors had surfaced, anonymous sources, questions about the legitimacy of his marriage, legal filings that never existed. Even his own mother had gone silent, her absence from the meeting more damning than words. The chairman stood slowly. Mr. Callaway, he said, clearing his throat, before we proceed with the vote on your continued position as CEO, we ask you plainly, is it true? Was your marriage fabricated to protect your public image? Isaac looked out at the room. Some faces were sympathetic, others cold. But none of them knew what this past month had been, what it had become. He opened his mouth to speak, and the doors at the back of the room opened. Heads turned, murmurs rippled. Denise. She stood in the doorway, hands trembling slightly, but eyes steady. Her golden hair was tied back, simple, elegant. Her presence alone sucked the air from the room. Isaac froze, heart caught mid-beat. She walked slowly down the center aisle, heels echoing on the marble, until she reached the front of the room. No one stopped her. No one dared. Then, without a word, she reached for his hand. He stared at her. She squeezed. And then, to the room, her voice shaking, but resolute, she said, I never thought a pretend marriage would make my heart feel so real. Gasps echoed. A few pens dropped, but no one spoke. She turned to Isaac, eyes brimming. I tried to walk away. I thought I had to. But the truth is, I don't want to pretend anymore. I love your daughter, and I think I love you too. Isaac's throat tightened. His fingers curled around hers. He turned to the board. I lied, he said plainly. At first. A ripple of shock moved through the room. I lied to protect the company. But somewhere in the middle of that lie, I found something I didn't expect. Someone. He looked back at Denise. And now, I have a choice to make. He stepped forward, releasing her hand just long enough to face the room with both feet planted. I built this company from the ground up. It's been my life's work. But today, I'm stepping down. The chairman blinked. Temporarily? Isaac nodded. For now. Not because of scandal, but because I need to rebuild something far more important." He turned back to Denise, his voice lowering. "A life. With her." The silence in the room was deafening. For once, the board had no arguments, no charts, no contingency plans. Only a man choosing love over power. Only a woman who had once been hired to care for a child, now holding the heart of the man who had lost everything. Isaac took Denise's hand again, and this time, he did not let go. As they walked out of the boardroom together, the whispers behind them faded, because for the first time in years, Isaac Calloway was not walking alone. 3 months later, the city bloomed into spring. Trees whispered green, windows opened to birdsong, and the air carried a gentle kind of hope. At a modest community center nestled between cafes and bookstores, Denise Carter stood before her first classroom. Bright posters lined the walls, shelves were filled with soft books and sensory toys. A hand-painted sign above the door read, "Little Lights, a place to grow." Her own place, her dream come true, a classroom for children with autism, built not from funding or fame, but from heart, and a man's quiet donation made in her name. At the front table sat Isla, now braver, a pink ribbon tied in her curls, her little dress covered in tiny butterflies. She colored carefully beside another child, glancing up often to be sure Denise was still nearby. When the clock struck 10, parents began to arrive for the small opening ceremony. But it was the last man through the door who made Denise's breath catch. Isaac. He wore a crisp white shirt, sleeves rolled, no tie. Simpler than the man she once met, but more him than ever. In his hands, a wild bouquet, not roses or lilies, but sunflowers, daisies, sprigs of lavender and clover, a little messy, a little untamed, beautiful. "Hi," he said softly. Denise smiled, surprised by the tears pricking her eyes. "You came." "Of course I did." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small folded envelope. No branding, no initials, just her name, in his handwriting. "I tried to write an email," he said, "but I knew it had to be this." She took it with shaking hands and opened it slowly. Inside was a single handwritten note. "The broken watch has finally stopped, but my heart hasn't. Not once, not since you walked into our lives. If you'll let me, I want to start over. No lies, no pretending, just us. Isaac." She looked up, and he was already lowering to one knee. Behind him, gasps filled the room. The children looked up, puzzled. A few parents smiled knowingly. Isaac held out a small velvet box. Inside was a simple, elegant ring, with a band shaped like intertwining branches. "Denise Carter," he said, voice steady but thick. "You turned a house into a home again. You made my daughter smile. You made me feel alive." He paused, looking at Isla, who had now stood and was inching closer. "I don't want to pretend anymore. I just want you. Will you marry me?" For a beat, Denise could not move. The world had quieted, narrowed to this moment. And then, Isla ran forward, curls bouncing, pink dress twirling like a flower in the wind. "Say yes, Mommy," she called, loud and clear. Denise laughed through her tears. She dropped to her knees and hugged Isla tightly, then turned to Isaac with eyes that could no longer hide what her heart had always known. "Yes," she whispered, "yes." Applause erupted. Parents, children, teachers, even a janitor in the back smiled wide. But none of it mattered more than the three of them, together, holding on, no longer afraid. There were no more scripts, no more secrets, no more pretending. Just a real family, choosing each other. And this time, forever. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories for more heartwarming tales that heal and inspire. Every week, we share emotional journeys of love, loss, and hope, just like Denise, Isaac, and little Isla. Tap that hype button to support the channel and help us bring more soul-touching stories to life. Thank you for watching, and remember, sometimes the most beautiful beginnings come from the most unexpected places. See you in the next story.